Let me talk to everyone about this. Will the US attack Cuba next? Actually, this topic has already been an old topic for a long time. Back when Trump first took office, Trump kept bringing up attacking Cuba. The reason it's trending again lately is because the US has made a series of new moves against Cuba, including strengthening its military presence in the Caribbean. According to some people, the deployment is already complete. There are also a series of political and diplomatic actions, like setting up a local court to hold a so-called trial for Cuba's former leader. Some even claim Cuban government diplomats have already gone to the US to negotiate. All this information gives the impression that the US is about to attack Cuba again. Actually, as you all know, when it comes to these topics, I don't like to answer them with a simple yes or no. However, while thinking about this question, I found something interesting as a byproduct, which is when it comes to the US using military force abroad, there's always a bit of a pattern to it. Some people might think the US hasn't even really finished business with Iran yet. Plus, the battle in Iran has pretty much hit a wall. They already lost, and the war isn't fully over yet. Would the US really open up another front right now? Isn't that just making things hard for itself? Actually, this way of thinking is just looking at the US with our own logic. But if you look at US history after World War II, you'll see the US has basically been fighting wars nonstop after World War II. You could say it's never really stopped. Look at every post-war US president. Almost all of them started a war while in office. They've all fought wars. There's an argument that Carter was the only exception. Carter never started a foreign war, but he still supported foreign wars, supported proxy wars. At that time, the Carter administration supported the Nicaraguan anti-Sandinista rebel forces. And just because Carter didn't fight a real war in his term, in US public opinion, Carter is seen as a rather weak president, not a very good president. And if you look at the wars the US fought after World War II, there actually have been quite a few defeats. And those defeats were often huge losses, like the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and more recently the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that were still ongoing. The war with Iran, none of these have gone well. They were all losses. But with so many wars and plenty of defeats, did that stop the US from fighting more? Did the US ever stop going to war just because it lost? Never. On the contrary, any president who hadn't fought a war would be seen as weak and lousy. So from this perspective, even if it's just for the election, they'll always want at least one war. This can be explained by looking at the nature of the US as a country. We all say the US is a classic hegemonic power. What defines a hegemonic power? It's not just because of their capabilities, their strength, or their ability to fight. There's also another important marker, which is that their threshold for starting wars is very low. They're quick to use force, quick to go to war, quick to invade others. This is a typical feature of a hegemonic power. Why is that? Because a hegemonic country needs others to be afraid of it. And how do you make others fear you? By being quick to resort to violence. The threshold for military action is low, so it's easy to make others fear you. And whether they win or lose, it never affects their willingness to start wars. Not at all. From another perspective, in the US economic structure, big capital is a deciding force, and a huge part of that capital is invested in the arms industry. If there are no wars, how will the arms giants operate or make money? How will capital profits be made? So, when it comes to US wars, they never consider, can they fight right after finishing one war, or after losing? Should they fight again? That's not part of their logic. Their logic is the wars can't stop. After one war, another must follow. If they lost the last one, all the more reason to fight the next, to make up for it. If you look at the US overseas military history since World War II, you'll notice another pattern. The really big losses often happened far away from the US, like in Asia, in the Middle East, or the Gulf region. Even in Africa, wasn't there the whole Black Hawk Down story in Somalia? And where do their victories usually happen? The US has its highest win rates in wars near its own borders, in the Americas. So you see, when the US suffers a defeat, to make up for it, they often choose the Americas. Like invading Grenada, invading Panama, invading Haiti. Those are all this type of operation. Not long ago, the kidnapping of Venezuela's President Maduro was also in the Americas, and Cuba happens to be in the Americas, right next to the US. After saying all this, some people might think, with what you're saying, the US will definitely attack Cuba. Actually, that's not necessarily true, because there are still counterfactors. What are the counterfactors? Even if the US is going to attack Cuba, it might not happen right away, because when the US fights these kinds of wars, the preparation time is often fairly long. What do they prepare? Diplomatic prep, media prep, military prep, intelligence prep, especially in the Americas. Military preparation is usually the quickest and easiest. Diplomatic, political, and intelligence preparation is often longer and more important. So, when the US is about to use military force, there's usually warning signs well in advance. But for Cuba, these warning signs have already been there for a while. So, what's the second factor? The second factor is that the US also does the math. What do they calculate? They ask whether this war is easy. Do they have a better chance of winning? That's for sure. And when it comes to attacking Cuba, this one is actually a bit tricky. Cuba is a small country. Geographically speaking, the US should have an easy time with it. So, why haven't they succeeded in all these years? Because the country is internally quite united, even after all these years. Is it possible they've become weaker inside? That's a hard conclusion to make. So the US will put extra effort into intelligence gathering, because if they find the country is united and has some capabilities, if you launch a war rashly, especially if you send troops for ground battles, there's a big chance people will die. Things could go wrong. Like in Cuba, if there is no internal problem, if you rush into sending troops for ground combat, whether you win or not, your own casualties are unavoidable. It could even mean heavy losses. And that's something the US really has to consider. So after all this, will the US attack Cuba or not? I still say the same thing. Don't be in a rush to predict. Place bigger bets. Just wait and see how it unfolds. For us, the US's frequent foreign wars are actually just training itself. From the end of World War II until today, the US's military actions have taken a huge toll. I think everyone can see that clearly. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you all. See you next time.